Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the importance of developing formal IT ethics policies for organizations. During our time, we'll go over the role IT managers play in minimizing liability and reducing security risks by 1. Understanding how an IT policy functions, 2. The benefits of developing one, and 3. We'll finally move into a discussion about the actual process of creating a policy. By educating the management and employees of an organization on their legal and ethical obligations and the proper use of information technology, IT managers can help an organization focus on its primary business goals. So let's dig in. Employees and companies can engage in unethical behavior in many different ways and for many different reasons. As future information security technology professionals, it is increasingly important that we have a deep understanding of our organization's legal and ethical responsibilities, as we play an important role in managing liability for privacy and security risks. Simply put, unethical employee behavior equals liability for an organization and can cost organizations millions of dollars. Key studies reveal that education is key to deterring unethical behavior. Employees must be informed, trained, and kept aware of expected ethical behaviors, especially in IT security, as many employees may not have the formal technical training to understand the difference between what constitutes ethical or unethical behavior. IT policy sits at the intersection of 4 main components in any organization: ethics, law, morality, and values. Developing an IT policy framework is the only way to have an effective IT policy model for operations and compliance. In fact, before you do any IT policy work, you should devote some time to determining your organizational framework and how the 4 main components, ethics, law, morality, and values, are incorporated into that framework, and then define how your IT policy framework will fit within it. Now that we've looked at an IT policy framework, how do you actually define an IT policy? An IT policy is the definition of how a company plans to protect their physical and information technology assets. This should act as a living document, meaning that the document is never finished, but it is continuously updated as technology and employee requirements change. A company's security policy may include anything from an acceptable use policy to an explanation of how security measures will be carried out and enforced, or even a procedure for evaluating the effectiveness of security policy. Generally, the benefits of an IT policy are massively important to an organization. IT policy provides not only a standard baseline of security policy, balances, and checks, but also it's based on the organization's information security policies, and it provides a solid, scalable basis for an enterprise-wide product deployment. IT policies work to heighten security awareness of company personnel while also helping organizations demonstrate their commitment to protecting their vital information assets. It should be clear by now that an IT manager plays a huge role in developing an IT policy. They are instrumental in this process as they are the closest to the technology, understand its business use best, and recognize potential ethical pitfalls that employees can fall into. Ultimately, the role of an IT manager is to safeguard the company against liability, and developing an IT policy is the best way to do that. It is very important that IT managers ensure that policies are implemented properly, because unlike laws, ignorance of a policy is an acceptable defense in the legal system, but only if it is enforceable. To ensure a policy is enforceable, it must be crafted and implemented with care to cover off on dissemination, meaning it must be widely distributed to the entire organization, not just a few people. Reviewed, meaning it must be confirmed that everyone in the organization has read the document. Comprehension, meaning a check should be done to confirm that there is general understanding of the terms of the policy. Compliance, meaning that employees agree and sign the document. And uniform enforcement, meaning that the policy can't be enforced in some situations when it's not enforced in others. Only when all these conditions are met can an organization penalize employees who violate the policy without fear of legal retribution. As we discussed, employees can engage in unethical behavior for many different reasons, the bulk of which fall into one of 3 categories: ignorance, meaning they didn't actually know they were acting unethically; accident, meaning they acted unethically without actually meaning to, or intent, meaning they acted unethically on purpose but didn't think they were going to get caught. No matter the cause of illegal, immoral, or unethical behavior, it is the responsibility of the IT professional to do everything in their power to deter these acts and use policy, education, and training and technology itself to protect information and security systems. However, policies only work if there are consequences when employees actually break the rules. Therefore, employees must have a fear that if they act unethically, they will be caught, which requires constant oversight of the IT policy by the IT manager. Probability of being caught, meaning, again, it requires constant oversight of the IT policy to catch every instance of unethical behavior. And probability of penalty being administered. So if someone gets caught, they will be prosecuted appropriately. When developing an IT policy, it's important to think of goals for both the organization and the employees. For example, while the goal for the business would be to minimize liability, the goal for the employee would be to implement a standard of consistent behavior amongst users. If the goal for the organization was to protect trade secrets and proprietary information, the goal for the employee would be to avoid allegations of negligence. If the goal for the company was to document and support compliance with law, best practice, and corporate governance, the goal for the employee would be to provide repeatable behavior through instruction and guidelines. If the goal for the company is to provide evidence needed for legal proceedings, the goal for the employee might be to enable managers to control IT-related matters in advance. And if the goal for the organization is to establish accountability and the foundation for compliance, the goal for the employee might be to require a minimum of user-end responsibilities. The complexity of issues involved in successfully implementing IT policies means that the size and shape of policies may vary widely from company to company. This depends on many factors, including the size of the company, the sensitivity of the business information, and the types of information and computing systems they use. The following is a list of general policies needed in any company, big or small. For example, internet and email usage, policies for download abuse, attachment blocking, and monitoring of communications. Assets and inventories would require policies for privacy and procurement. Data retention would require policies for archiving and data recovery. And security policies would require some policies on password policies and wireless access. There are several necessary requirements that must be met at each stage when developing an IT policy. For example, when you determine your requirements for the policy, you must also align those requirements with your business goals. When you create the policy, make sure you have the right people in the room to ensure that all viewpoints are being taken into account. You don't want to write the policy in a vacuum for fear you could be missing some major feedback from important players. When you validate the policy, make sure you get buy-in from management, as implementation will likely be top-down and require their help. When you enforce the policy, do so in a way that calls for consequences when someone breaks the rules. Otherwise, people will begin to recognize that nothing will really happen if they don't abide by the policy, which will ultimately nullify the document. And finally, make sure you review and maintain the policy to keep it relevant to the current technology and employee environment. For example, as mobile phones are upgraded with new technology, it's important to integrate new, relevant guidelines into the policy. Policies are only successful if 1. They are aligned with business goals, and 2. There is executive buy-in. It can be a daunting task to produce a policy, but by following the correct process and getting buy-in from all related parties, an organization can be successful at creating a very successful policy management structure. When starting to create an IT policy, the key is to not try and reinvent the wheel. There are so many great resources out there to help you look at what others are doing and get a sense of what might work as far as best practices without having to start from scratch. Rather than analyzing every risk, consider using industry best practices that will help you simplify the process of creating an IT policy. But most importantly, remember to pay attention to regulations and requirements from government, industry, and partners to make sure all the information in your policy is both current and relevant. There are a lot of resources for IT managers out there when developing IT policy. From websites with templates to articles explaining government requirements and policy in layman terms, there's something to be said about using the internet to crowdsource as much of your policy as